There we go. Welcome everyone to the first of our Sanlam Cape Town Marathon training webinars. I see a whole bunch of folks are still clicking on, so just give it a few minutes so that everybody can join the call. It's good to have each and every one of you with us. If you wouldn't mind just letting us know in the chat that you can see and hear us. Let us know where you are joining us from as well, what part of the world you are in. You can just pop that into the chat. There's Jacques saying can see and hear, which is fantastic. Isaac Lundell saying can see and hear as well. Isaac's in Plumstead in Cape Town. Cool. Helen's in Claremont. Welcome, Helen. Nice to have you with us on today as well. Siba's in Durban. We've got Jason in Greenpoint. Cool. Looks like everything is working exactly the way it should. Gats in Heidelberg. We've got Desleen in Sea Point. Cool. Looks like everything is working exactly the way it should. Mariska's in Bloemfontein. Welcome, Mariska. Nice to have you on as well. Adrian's in, or is it Adrian's in Pretoria? McElroy's in Stellenbosch. Cool. Looks like everything is working exactly the way it should. Simone and Roy is from Heidelberg in Gauteng. Welcome to the two of you as well. We've got Andrew in Josie, Iman. Cool. Also joining us in Cape Town. Fabulous. I think it's time to jump straight into things and let you know what we are going to be covering today. A very, very warm welcome. The entire team here at Coach Parry are so excited that we've got races coming back, which is amazing. We're going to just run through some brief introductions for those of you who don't know who we are. On screen with me is Lindsey Parry wearing the Bafana jersey, celebrating. Hopefully not too soon, Lindsey. It's, as they say, one swallow doesn't make summer, or what's it? But a win's a win. We'll take it. For those of you who don't know who Lindsey is, he's the founder of CoachParry.com. He has a postgraduate degree in sports science, and for the past 15 years has been coaching amateur and professional athletes to PRs and podiums in some of the world's most prestigious races and events. Some of the names you may recognize. Lindsey coached Richard Murray to his very first Olympic Games, as well as his first WTS race victory. He's also coached back-to-back winners at the Comrades Marathon. He's also led teams to the Olympic Games and Commonwealth Games. Just got back from his third Olympics in Tokyo, and he's a pretty decent runner to boot as well. 2:45 marathon PB. Lindsey Parry, nice to have you with us today.
Forward to tonight, and really thrilled that we've got a race to talk about in South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So Shona Hendricks also on screen with me. Just to give you a little bit of background about Shona, she's the former head of sports science at the University of Pretoria. She heads up the female athlete program here at CoachParry.com. Also has a postgraduate degree in sports science and MBA, and she's also a certified strength and conditioning specialist through the NCSA in the United States. And for the past 13 years has also worked with amateur and professional athletes in the build-up to some of the world's most prestigious events and tournaments. Shona has worked with Olympic bronze medalist Bridget Hartley in the build-up to her bronze medal at the Olympic Games in canoeing. She's also worked with pretty much every single level of South African the female football, national level from juniors right through to Banyana. Also worked with Caroline Wasserman in the build-up to her Comrades win. And Shona is also an avid triathlete and runner. Shona, nice to have you with us today too.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I should be wearing my Banyana jersey because we do know, that's way better than Bafana's, right? So I know Lindsey's showing us up, but yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. All right, cool. And then just so you know who I am, I'm known as the guy who lost to Backstreet Boy en route to running his very first ultramarathon. I'm just going to be sort of facilitating everything here today. I got a bee in my bonnet about 11 years ago that I wanted to start running. I clocked in at a pretty hefty 165 kgs. Since then, I've finished multiple marathons and ultras, including the Sanlam Cape Town Marathon. And unlike Lindsey, I don't have a marathon PR of 2:45. Definitely more average than Lindsey, without a doubt. So let's jump into what we're going to learn tonight. We're going to be going into a lot of detail this evening. We're going to talk about where you should be right now from a training perspective. We'll be looking at what to focus on in the next 4 weeks. It is 6 weeks to race a weekend, just shy of 1 day. It would have been this past weekend. So really what to focus on in your peak training. We're going to talk about goal setting and digging into that in a bit more detail, as well as the importance of recovery. And then we'll be looking at strength training, and particularly the 2 reasons why you should be doing strength training between now and race day. And then also what sort of strength training you should be doing as well. And we absolutely love questions, okay? For those of you who have jumped on the call late, you'll see there is a chat function. You please feel free to pop any questions in that chat, and we'll answer as many of them as we can throughout the presentation. If we don't get to yours during the presentation, we will stick around and do a pretty extensive Q&A at the end as well. So please, if any stage, if there is something you'd like to know or clarity on anything, pop that into the chat as well. So let's jump straight into things. Lindsey, we'll come to Shona in a moment. Shona will be chatting the strength training and that sort of stuff. But Lindsey, let's talk about where we should be right about
so look, with
now.
6 weeks to go, we really should be consistent. In theory, we should be in the peak part of our training, but I am gonna unpack that a little bit in what we should be doing in the next 6 weeks, just because we know that because of the pandemic, because of a lot of uncertainty around what's happening, and I think now a lot of people are finally happy and confident that the Sanlam Cape Town Marathon will be going ahead. And so we may need to do things a little bit outside of the norm. So the important thing for me really isn't about specifically how much volume you're doing, but we do want to be quite consistent in what we are doing. And so rather than being caught on a specific mileage, you really want to be trying to run 3 to 4 days a week consistently. If you're training for the faster runs, sub 4, 3.5, as we move towards 3 hours, you probably should, not probably, then you should be running 5 to 6 days a week. And you need to be doing strength training, which is absolutely why we are making the strength training the main component of today's webinar. And in the next webinar, we will be talking about nutrition. But we really, with so little time left to the race, strength training is one of the areas that we can make a really big impact on how you are going to perform on race day. And yeah, Shona will take us through that. So my part was only really to emphasize that.
Yeah, Lindsey, often, and we're going to talk about sort of cramming a little bit later on, but consistency is such an important part of any training plan. It's not necessarily how much you do in your longest run. It's you better serve doing slightly less over a longer period of time than trying to smash it all together in a short period of time.
I'm going to touch that on that literally on the next slide, and that is, okay, we've got the A scenario, which is that you have been training quite well in blind faith, and so you are entering in your peak mileage weeks, and then when and how long should that longest run be versus if we aren't. And of course, we've also got a virtual 10K that some people are preparing for, and we've got some trail options that people are training for. So we'll try and cover all of those bases and give everyone a good idea of what to do for the next 4 weeks, really, because we will then do another webinar 2 weeks to go to really just help people unpack what to do in those last week. And again, it's going to be a question of, there's going to be those that have managed to go through a full 12 to 16 week training cycle, and their taper is going to look a little bit different to those people that have tried to do a marathon or a long trail run in 6 weeks.
Absolutely. Cool. Let's jump then into the next 4 weeks, Lindsey. As you've alluded to, what are some of the things we do need to be cognizant of?
I think that's what I've been trying to lead up to here, is that we want to train for where you are now, okay? And so if you've got a really nice base behind you and you've already gone through a little bit of a strength block of doing hills and that sort of thing, then we're going to move into a speed endurance period. Now you're going to be looking at doing things like 800s, or let's call them long intervals on the faster plans, and as we move through to the slow plans, you'll be doing mid intervals, and then moving into sharpening up towards the end of that 4 week block. What you'll also be doing now is kind of building up so that somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks out, we want you to do your longest run. Now, 25Ks is a good number to get to. In South Africa, because we are so very ultra driven, we have this either doing the distance. So there's a lot of people who do 45K training runs for a marathon, which can be useful. But again, I like to split this up into what are your race goals. And again, I'm jumping ahead in the presentation because these things do tie in together. But ultimately, the faster runners probably need to get themselves up to what we would call your traditional 20-miler, 32 to maybe 36 kilometers. And then further towards the back of the pack, you're looking at 25Ks. And then one of the points that Brad alluded to and what he was asking me about was to say that if you're doing your long run at 12 to 15Ks at the moment, then we don't want to build that up too quickly. And maybe we're not going to get to that 25, 30K run. Maybe we're going to get to 23, 24Ks. But if over the next 4 to 5 weekends, we are just very consistently, we move ourselves up from that 15 to the 20 to the early 20s, and you just are very consistent, plus you do the strength training that Shona is going to tell you about, that is going to help you to be in a much better place for Cape Town, because, and this is the key, you're going to line up being uninjured. And that's why I want to say do not cram. So we need to be realistic about the training that we've done up to this point, as well as realistic about our goal. And again, I'm going to jump into how do we choose that goal so that we are training for the appropriate program, so we don't put too much pressure on ourselves to do too much training in these next 6 weeks, because we do not want to get injured before race day.
Yeah, Lindsey, you make such an important point. I mean, you mentioned the pandemic earlier. There have been a lot of people who have trained consistently right throughout, but I think for a lot of people, motivation has been seriously lacking because there haven't been races on the calendar, and it's been really, really hard to sort of get into into some decent sort of shape. And with the Sanlam Cape Town Marathon happening in 6 weeks' time, it's easy to fall back to where you were 18 months ago. If you were training for whatever goal race you were super fit. Chances are, if you haven't been consistent over the last 18 months, you do need to relook at your goals, as you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. So if you are a 4-hour marathon and that's what you have, run in the past, then you can't just assume that you're going to rock up at Cape Town. I think we all have to look at this and go, right, we're in a pandemic. Some people have managed to maintain really great focus, and they've worked on short-term speed, they've maybe worked on strength, and they've worked on these peripheral things about running, and so maybe you have landed yourself in a position where you are ready and training for a PB, but the opposite is true if you have lost a little bit of motivation. I mean, I'm not ashamed to use myself as an example here. When the cross-country scene came back, I was training really hard, and my main focus was actually on the London Marathon. I'd also entered Cape Town because I really didn't want to miss the opportunity of running the Cape Town Marathon, the Sanlam Cape Town Marathon again. But when we went back at here in lockdown and the cross-country season got canned, it hit me hard, and my training just spiraled out of control. I missed a lot of workouts, and then London went by the wayside because who can afford to quarantine in a hotel in London for 2 weeks before they go and do a race. And then of course I was like, well, Cape Town's definitely on. Got myself out of that funk, and now I'm 7 weeks of training hard, but I realized that any chance of getting anywhere near 245, I would kill myself if I tried to do that. I'm trying to give myself an outside chance of going sub 3, but I'm doing it in a very realistic way, and I'm just accepting the fact that I can only train to the level that I can train. And if in 4 weeks' time that takes me to a place where I feel like sub 3 is a possibility, I'll take a risk on race day. But I can't do the workouts that I normally do to give me the confidence to know I'm going to run a sub 3, because if I do that, I know I'm going to get injured, and then I'm either going to have a really lousy race or I'm not going to get to run at all.
Cool stuff. All right, got some great questions coming through. Lindsey has some great feedback from, let me just tag this so that I get the right one up. This is from Soleil. I hope I've pronounced the name correct. Soleil is saying training definitely on track. We've had to readjust the days we run, some weeks due to weather and some having other setbacks. But overall, my group and I are on track. The 450 program feels like a breeze. Absolutely loving it, which is great news. And then speaking of that 450 program, Lindsey, Ilse was asking, the 450 program doesn't include any intervals. Am I supposed to add intervals?
That's a really great question. And it is part of the reason why we actually have a forum, because when we write plans, or when I write plans for the general population, I've really always got to take into account the lowest common denominator. So I'm writing that program for the person who's probably out to run their first marathon, and they're probably on the journey to running that marathon because they are looking to qualify for another event. And so in writing that, what I am trying to do is to make sure that that runner is going to do enough, but build up slowly enough that they're not going to arrive at the race uninjured, and do the appropriate intensity. And by intensity, I'm not talking about interval type of intensity. I'm talking about the appropriate intensity on the easy runs to ensure that aerobically they are fit enough to be able to run 42 kilometers. However, if we have athletes with a little bit more running experience, not necessarily marathon experience, so it might also be their first marathon, but they have done quite a number of other races and they've been through quite a number of other plans, then doing some form of intensity work, whether it be a regular time trial or whether it be some tempo sessions or perhaps adding in a little bit of hill work, will indeed help them to run better. And the forum is there to then get the right advice so that those workouts are pitched at the right intensity again for a 450 athlete with the right experience. So yeah, I'd encourage you to hop in that forum. Let's get a feel for how long you've been running, what your ultimate goals are in running, and then we can make a few recommendations for what intervals to add in.
Awesome. Ilse, great question. Lindsey, Shona asked in the chat, how's everyone's training going? And a great comment from Jason. Jason says, we'll know after the 3 hour 20 long, slow distance in a couple of weeks. So far, so good. Let me ask this because, again, I saw a post in the forum either yesterday or this morning where somebody was asking about running at the slower pace in your long runs. Should you be testing yourself in your long runs to see how your training is going?
So where you test yourself is the plans have actually got some time trials built into them. Those time trials will allow you to test how the training is going and help you to make predictions on what you are capable of running. And now we are jumping into the next slide, so I guess that's a good segue. But what is important to do on those long runs, and what we are going to talk about in the next webinar, is putting into plan your nutrition plan for race day. So what you should be doing on those long runs is figuring out what you tolerate, what you look forward to, what tastes good for you, because there really are a lot of products on the market. We don't all respond equally to all of them. A gel is not a gel, and some people can't tolerate gels at all. And you know, in South Africa, we typically get Coke and Energade or Powerade on the side of the road. That's given to us at the water points. So you've got to try these things out and know whether they actually sit well for you or if they make you feel nauseous, if it's too sweet for you, so that you can start finding things that will work for you and give you the energy that you need to do 42 kilometers.
Cool. Let's jump into, as you said, the next bit of the presentation, Lindsey, and that is goal setting. And we're not talking about, are you going to run a marathon? Because it's almost too late now. It's 6 weeks to go. Hopefully we're all on track to run whichever race it is, whether it's one of the trails or the marathon or the 10K. But when you're talking about setting goals...
I I must ask for forgiveness because I realize there's tons of people on this call that perhaps aren't doing the marathon, but the marathon is probably the more extreme of the two. I know the 24K trail will be tough. So you can probably, when I say marathon, you can think 24K interchangeably. If you are a 10K runner and you're doing your first 10K in particular, then 10Ks is fairly daunting. But the idea for you would literally be to just stick to doing the minimum, doing it consistently, and then I promise you on race day, run, walk, you will get through the shorter trail and the 10K. I think and again, I always have to be careful here. We don't want to trivialize the task for someone who's never run 10Ks. I mean, that might as well be 100Ks. You know, in relative terms, it's a long way. But I think the marathon is a big, scary beast on its own, and so we tend to default to just talking about that. But how do we set the right goal? Now, the most important thing is to take into account two things. One, where is my training? How well is my training going? And then number two, what have I done? What have I been able to? Have I been able to run a 5K hard? Have I done an 8K hard? Have I done a half marathon hard? So we need to base our belief in what we are capable of doing on a recent experience, preferably. If you're a very experienced runner, then you can default to, okay, I know I've been doing enough training, and when I train to this level, typically this is the number that I can go for. So again, that there isn't like a fixed formula to say, okay, if you run 5 kilometers in 25 minutes, that means you're capable of running a 4-hour marathon. It's not, there isn't a simple thing where you go, oh, I run this, therefore I do this. But what I would again just encourage people to do is to jump in that forum and say, hey, my time is X, and that's where on the plans themselves, when you've gone to load your training plan, you'll see on the front description of that, it'll say, right, this plan is for somebody who would like to run X marathon, and you should be capable of running close to one of the following times. And we give a 5, a 10, and a 21, typically, sometimes a marathon time. And that will really help to guide you to make sure that you are following the right plan for you. If you fall in between those numbers, jump in the forum. Let's make sure that, particularly with only 6 weeks to go, 6 weeks minus 1, because we've already lost Monday. So I mean, it's close. People think 6 weeks is a long time. When you're training, you'll blink, 6 weeks will be gone, and we'll be in Cape Town lining up to run the race. So if you're unsure, if there's something in there that doesn't make sense, then get into the forum. Let us know how training's going. Let us know what time you've run. Let's make sure you're on the right program to get the best out of the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, if you train anything like I do, 6 weeks, it's almost time to taper, Lindsey. That's maybe not. All right, let's talk about recovery, because obviously we're heading into, I mean, the next 4 weeks is peak training in the build up to a race. Recovery is crucial. What are some of the things we need to be cognizant of?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really not, this isn't going to be a big theoretical explanation. I really want to give people a very practical guide. I've only got a couple of minutes. The strength training really is important, so I don't want to squeeze Shona out. But the recovery should be looked at as part of your training, because if we don't recover properly, then we can't absorb the fitness. We're not going to get fitter and stronger. We're just going to get more tired and possibly get injured and or sick. Okay, so what we want to do now is make sure that our volume and frequency is appropriate, and that's the kind of message I've been trying to drive from the beginning. And that is to say that if you have been training properly from the get-go, and you are somewhere between week 4 and 8 of good training. You don't have to worry too much about adjusting the volume and frequency that are on the plans that you are following on Coach Parry. You can then go right ahead, follow those plans as they are. However, if you are coming in late, if you've started from very little, if you haven't been consistent, we just want to manage that volume and that frequency. You might want to focus on doing the long runs because you need it for the confidence, but then I might look at doing a 3-day a week instead of a 4-day a week, and maybe that 4th day doing some cross training. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of managing the volume and the frequency to make sure that you recover properly. Having rest days is imperative. Okay, so we do have strength training in the plans, so you can see in the plans how you can work the week around so that you are getting in your strength training, but you're also getting in your rest days. And then we've got 4 key weeks ahead of us. Okay, we've got 6 weeks to race day and 4 key weeks ahead of us. So if you can really prioritize sleep and nutrition, I'm going to literally give you 3 important points on each of sleep and nutrition. Okay, so when it comes to sleep, if you can aim for 30 to 60 minutes more than you normally get. So I'm not preaching a specific number, but if you can just aim for that little bit more, number 1. Number 2, if you can get off your phone, laptop, TV around 30, again, 60 minutes is great, but that's not always practical. But if you can do it for at least 30 minutes, if you can get off screens 30 minutes before you get to sleep, that makes an enormous difference to how your brain perceives night versus day and allows you to get into a far deeper sleep. And point number 3 is if you can have all lights, if you've got a red dot on the TV in your room, unplug the TV or cover the TV, but you don't want any light. As far as possible, cell phone out of the bedroom, or again, cover it with a towel so that your brain can't pick up any flashing light, or if a message comes through, a light starts to shine on your phone. So if you do those 3 things, you're going to make an enormous difference to your recovery. And then in terms of nutrition, try and plan it for the next 4 weeks. Try and plan your nutrition better so that you can prepare most of the food yourself, and try and stay away from boxes, packets, tins, that sort of thing. As far as possible, try and eat as fresh as you possibly can. The second point when it comes to nutrition is the timing of the nutrition. So we want to take in carbohydrates and a little bit of protein within 15 to 30 minutes of doing exercise. Okay. And the third point is that I either need you to fuel for exercise. So if you're not opposed to carbohydrates and you are not banting, that just means getting in enough carbohydrates throughout the day so that when you train, you've got enough stored carbohydrates. And if you are banting and opposed to or reducing your carbs or fasting, etc., then when you do your hard workouts and when you do your long workouts, I need you to fuel in exercise. Okay, so those are our 3 points. We're going to try and eat as healthy as we can. We're going to feed just after exercise, and we're either going to fuel for exercise by making sure that healthy eating around the day includes carbohydrates, or if it doesn't include carbohydrates, when we hit our interval sessions and our long runs, we're going to take carbs.
Cool, awesome. Lindsey, just a couple of great questions coming through, then we'll get Shona to jump in. One from Mark saying, for the interval sessions, if we can maintain a faster than recommended pace for that session, should we try and run the session faster or keep to the recommended pace to be fresher for the rest of the week?
It's much more important for me that people stick to the pacing bands on the easy runs so that they are fresher for the high intensity session, and then you will recover adequately. I'm happy for people to go slightly faster in the interval sessions, provided you can maintain that faster speed through the session. So often in a scenario like this, if I have someone who's feeling like you are quite comfortable and the next day not feeling that fatigued, is that let's say there's 6 repetitions. I'll break them into 2, 2, 2, and I'll say, right, start the first 2 in zone. The next 2 you can go faster. If you're still feeling like you've got more left in the tank, then we go faster still. Next week, you start at the pace of the middle 2, and so you progress, so that if you do it that way, you're getting a little bit more out of the program, but you never risk injury, and you don't risk blowing up during the session.
Cool. Lindsey, question from Clive. Clive saying, can I play tennis? We've got clarity. He didn't mean on the race day. He means on his rest days. And I think that applies to other things like cycling or swimming. Is it advisable? I know a lot of the training plans that we've got on our training platform are 4-day-a-week plans. Can you do other things on days you're not running?
Look, I would again encourage people that are very serious about running a very fast time, that things like tennis would be probably a very high risk for getting injured. But if you're essentially a tennis player who got into running maybe to be fit for tennis, or running is just part of this mix of things that you like to do that keeps you really healthy and interested, and tennis is part of your social vibe, and you're working towards marathon, then of course I would still try to keep 1 day a week where you do give your legs a proper break from that kind of high pounding that you get from running in tennis. But most of us, running is not our profession. Running is something that we do socially and to enjoy, and therefore we're not going to do it at the expense of everything else.
Awesome stuff. Cool. I'm going to get Shona in. Lindsey, you out of the hot seat for now. I know you're going to come back and answer some more questions a little bit later on, but we are going to jump straight into the strength training. We do want to be super cognizant of your time. Welcome back, Shona. Let's talk strength training. I think a lot of people discount the impact that strength training can have, but let's chat about why strength training is so important.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that they discount it. We all know it's important. It's just that we don't do it, right? And I just think that once you get into a routine of doing it, you start realizing how beneficial it is to your running. So there's a couple of reasons why. So I'm going to go through 2 of them. The first one is that it is vital for injury prevention, right? So running is a compounding sport. It puts a lot of stress on your muscles, on your joints, on your ligaments, on all of that. And so, we want to be able to ensure that our bodies are strong enough to sustain those loads. So those of you who are doing the marathon, those of you who are doing the trail, those are even more compounding. And so you want to make sure that your body has made itself strong enough that you can then sustain the loads of running, so that you can continue to be consistent with your training, which is really the key point, because we don't want to miss blocks of training. I mean, now you've got these next 4 weeks with your 2-week taper. You really don't want to be missing any kind of training sort of sessions. Now you want to stay as consistent as you can. The second reason why it helps with injury prevention is from a biomechanical level. I don't want to go into a lot of this because it's a whole webinar in itself, but if you think about every time you run, every time you step, your pelvis, we call it pelvic stability, every time you step, there's this little shifting that's happening. And because of that, it puts a lot of strain on perhaps your knees or your hip flexor or whatever sort is going on. And if we can get the glutes really, really strong in the same time with the opposite obliques in the abdominals, and that will hold your pelvic stability all together. And what that just means is and why I think that is so important is because your body is essentially a chain. If something is not right in a certain area, if there's a weakness somewhere in your body will then react. They might present with a problem further down the chain because it's going to compensate for that. And so if there's something that is not strong enough within the core, your body's going to learn. It's going to go, okay, I'm going to try and hold that stability somewhere else. And then that muscle works harder, and then that's why something happens. Or there's something wrong in the lower limb, and then that might present higher up. And so that is really, really important. So we just need to use strength training to complement our running, which is really, really key. The second point is that it improves your running performance, okay? if we look at the elite athletes, there's this lot of talk around VO2 max and why elites, what differentiates elite athletes from recreational athletes. And a lot of people will say, oh, it's VO2 max. But the main differentiating factor is running economy. The elites are so much more efficient at utilizing fuel and being able to go faster and longer. And think about running economy, sounds like a fancy word. Think about running economy as the fuel economy of your car. You want a car where you can put a lot of fuel, especially with the way petrol prices are currently going. You want to be able to put a lot of fuel in your car and be able to go for way longer. It's the same concept here. And so that is why the elites are so good. And strength training can improve your running economy by up to 4 to 5%. You are literally getting better as a runner. You're getting more efficient as a runner without doing running, by doing strength training. And so that's really, really key. It makes you a better runner. Obviously, this seems like an obvious point, but it increases your power and your strength. If you're doing the trail at Sanlam, Cape Town, in the next couple of weeks, that is quite a hard event. You are going to have the strength that gets you up those hills. If there's a lot of downhills in there, you want to have that load to be able to help you with that eccentric sort of load. And so increasing that power and strength, and in particular in and around the core, if you can increase your strength in that area, it allows for greater power outputs within your running. You essentially become a far more efficient runner by just doing strength training, which I think is absolutely key. You're essentially getting something for free, with your running. I know we all hate strength training, but yes, it's something without having to run that's making you a better runner. And then this last point is key, and Lindsey's spoken around recovery and how important recovery is. Just to reiterate that, I just want to say again, I think that, we have to get into our minds that we only benefit from training in recovery. And if we utilize strength training in the right sort of way, we actually recover quicker so that we get ready for our next session a lot sooner, which is absolutely awesome and really helps a lot. Okay.
Cool. Shona, before you jump to the next slide, I think there's a great question that leads perfectly into the next one. Joni's running training is going really well, but wants to know, is it worthwhile to start with a strength training now? Let's talk about, from a strength training perspective, what to focus on, and if you've never done any, is now a good time?
It is a good time. I always want to say to people, don't wait to start. It's never too late. If we're 2 weeks out of race day, yes, then I'd say no. Don't start then. We want to taper. We want to freshen up. And obviously, as you start strength training, your body needs a little bit more time for adaptation. But now, yes, with 6 weeks out, I still think you can have some benefits. I'm not going to put Lindsey on the spot here, and I'll bring him in a little bit later because I want him to give his example as to why the strength training makes such a difference. And I don't know if maybe we should just put him on the spot. Lindsey, if you're there, maybe just give your example. You're busy training for a sub 3 hour Cape Town and been struggling, right? And then you did some strength training.
Yeah, look, very simply, during lockdown, obviously I did a lot of strength training, and I felt the best I felt in a hell of a long time. Came out of lockdown, we were allowed to run outside again, and I smoked my fastest 10K in almost 5 years, sub 38-minute 10K. And then obviously slowly got lazy, and I've pretty much had a sore right glute and right hamstring and left adductor for, I don't know, a year, basically since I stopped doing strength training. And now with the increased load with Cape Town Marathon training, it was just unpleasant. So I was like, right, the only way I'm going to pull this off is some strength training. Well, immediately after the first session, the next day was the first day that I haven't felt my adductor when I roll over in my sleep. So it's the first day in nearly a year that my adductor didn't wake me up. And after the second session, haven't felt my hamstring or my adductor. Well, I didn't for a whole week. After my 30K training run, I did feel it again. Strength training again today, gone. So I won't be missing my strength training until, well, hopefully never, but certainly not before, hopefully before Comrade, before Cape Town end.
We got that on record, right? He's not going to miss it because we might hold him to that. But essentially, I don't think it is too late to start. There's benefits in what you can do. At the most, I'd say twice a week. And I think a lot of what benefited Lindsey in the strength sessions is the mobility that we do in our strength sessions, okay? So if you have zero strength experience and you've done no strength training ever, once a week is fine. Do once a week from now until your taper period, but twice a week, if you've done some strength training, that is a good way to go, okay? We really want to be focusing on injury prevention now. So, because there isn't a lot of massive performance that we can really benefit from, so close to race day. So you want to be looking at things like your stabilizers, your core. Runners always forget their hamstrings. We have to be working on our hamstrings, eccentric hamstring work, lots of glutes, obviously. And I'm putting the word there, foot core. A lot of you might not have heard of that. I'm a massive believer in foot core. Again, the body's a chain. If you don't work on the small stabilizing muscles in your feet, something else could go wrong. Those of you who struggle with plantar fasciitis will know that is not a fun injury to have. And there's little ways that we can fix that. Those exercises will take you 10 minutes a day to do. Okay, so we really, really just want to focus on things like that. So close to race day, we don't want to be loading the body with too much weight necessarily. So again, if you're very new to strength training, start with body weights. If you've done some strength training, some light weights is fine. You want to do, I say increase repetitions. That's probably not the right wording, but you want to be doing more repetitions, anywhere between, I want to say 8 to 15 reps or 10 to 15 reps per exercise, more endurance orientated as opposed to strength orientated repetitions. That's what we're looking for. We don't want to make you bulking up. That's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for injury prevention and focused on that. And a lot of the time, get this here often, and this will come into play. I think there was a question around this, but the goal with the strength training is not to hurt. You might, and you probably will feel a little bit stiff within the next couple of days if you've just started strength training, but you don't want to feel sore for an extended period of time. That's not the goal of strength training. If you haven't done strength training in a number of months or years, you are going to experience some DOMS, delayed onset of muscle soreness, but you don't want to get to that point. You want to be doing strength training that complements your running. We've had people on the platform in the forum who are asking, saying, I've done the strength sessions, but I feel like I'm good to go afterwards. I don't feel like I'm broken, but my glutes are a little bit stiff, but I'm feeling really good. And I'm like, well, yes, that's the goal. We're not trying to break you in those sessions. The goal of what we're trying to do is to build you up, to make you strong enough to complement your running and make you strong enough for that specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Shona, that was actually the question. It was from Muddy Mecha, I think it was, saying, been having question on how to deal with the strength training and the DOMs after strength training. I think you've pretty much covered there. If you do end up with it, what's the best way to deal? Do you rest or do you train through it?
No, don't train through it. It's if you have severe DOMs, so if that's 7 to 14 days after that strength session, it's not ideal to run through that. And in particular, your quality or your interval kind of runs, you want to rest, get yourself back, and then start with some light kind of sessions, whether it be some light cycling or light swimming or some light running again. But don't power through those sessions. And if I can just say this, then if you are experiencing DOMs from that strength session, then just bring it back down a little bit. A lot of our strength sessions on the platform are 3 sets of certain exercises. Then don't do 3 sets. If you're new, start with 2 sets, and then the following week, go up to 3 sets. And you're still going to be getting so much benefit, because the first thing that starts happening, the nervous system starts building and getting stronger. And that's already a really good adaptation. So you're still going to be getting a benefit. You don't have to be smashing every session. And I really don't want you to be feeling absolutely broken and sore after them.
Absolutely. Cool. Shona, there was from a question from Daniil. Daniil saying, can I substitute strength training with a Pilates class once a week?
Yes, Daniil, you can. So I quite like, I think Pilates is great. I think it has, and yoga maybe in the same category here. It definitely has massive benefit. Yoga, probably more so from a mobility perspective, Pilates for sure with the core and the hamstring work that they do. So yeah, I would like to, if you're going to do Pilates, definitely continue with that once a week. I would still like to see that you're doing some running specific injury prevention work. So that's the stabilizers, a lot of that lower limb, a lot of the footwork, a lot of the sort of glutes and hip flexors that maybe the Pilates doesn't get to. But yes, definitely of your 2 sessions a week, one of those being Pilates is completely fine.
Cool stuff. And then there was a great from Elmin. Here we go. Elmin saying the strength training on the platform is great. I'm doing 2 sessions a week, the intermediate to advanced on the Wednesday and the advanced session on a Thursday. Is it advisable to replace one session with more weight or more traditional gym sessions such as leg presses, etc.?
So I mean, you can definitely. I mean, utilizing weight and adding in that load is great because it is going to get you stronger. I'm not sure that I'd want you to be doing that right now before Cape Town necessarily, because, you know, I don't want your running sessions to take strain at the expense of the strength, you know. So what we're prescribing in those sessions for now, for you getting up to Cape Town, will suffice. After Cape Town marathon and you want to get stronger again, then yes, definitely you can start loading those other exercises. But things like leg press and the machine work exercises, I'm not a massive fan of because they're quite static. You know, they isolate particular muscles and they don't work in the way that we really want to work as runners. As we're running, every time you're running, you're practically on one foot every time. And when you're doing something like a leg press or a leg extension, you're sitting. So you're not activating your core. You're not using all the muscles that we need to get working. So for sure, you can start loading those exercises. But I'd be cognizant of what type of exercises that you're doing. It's always really important. That's quite key in how you're doing them.
Cool. Shona, question from Clive. Clive saying, I'm struggling with plantar fasciitis. Is there a longer risk running through it? I've just shared, we did a video on our YouTube channel a few weeks ago about how to treat and prevent plantar fasciitis, but some advice for Clive on running through plantar?
Yeah, I mean, I don't generally like you to run through it because it's one of those things that's not really going to go away. So to start off from a treatment perspective, taking a bottle of water, putting it in the freezer, making that ice, and then rolling your foot over that is going to make a massive impact. And then when that sort of clears a bit and you can start running again and that it's not as inflamed, then definitely putting in some of those foot core exercises that I'm talking about, because the thing with the plantar fascia is that every time we step, it shortens and it creates what they call a windlass mechanism. So it does this, and that's what gives you that springing effect. That's what gives you the power, or essentially to drive you forward. And so, of course, if you don't have enough stability or strength in the other small muscles around that plantar fascia just works overtime. And so by doing some of the foot core exercises, and they're simple little things. In particular for plantar, there we go. Thanks, Nikki. But in particular for plantar fasciitis, what you can do is if you roll up a sweat towel, so you roll up your sweat towel, right? So you roll it up like that, and then you do a calf raise, but you put your toes on the sweat towel. So your toes are pointing up. You'll feel a nice stretch under your foot, and then you do a calf raise in that position. That is excellent for plantar fasciitis because it stretches out that plantar fascia. It also helps build some stability around those small intrinsic muscles. So that's a really good one. Some of the other foot core exercises, we do toe crunches. So rolling out a sweat towel, using your toes to crunch them all together, and try and get all of them to crunch, not just the big toe. Try and get all of them to crunch. And maybe while you're sitting there now, I always do this. This is quite funny. Just kick off your shoes and try and lift your big toe without lifting any of the other toes, just the big toe. And you'll feel that is quite difficult to do. And so we have to start working on those small intrinsic muscles, because that, if they don't, let me explain it this way. So if the foot essentially works like your core of your body, right? There's stabilizing muscles, and then there's muscles that move things around. And if you don't work in the stabilizing muscles, the body compensates in other ways. And that's where I'm saying that things are a chain, and there's issues that get caused in and around that. So yeah, there's lots of things we can do for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsey, I'm going to bring you in here next. There's a great question for you. But speaking of that foot core as well, if you go to the training plan section on the Coach Parry training app and just type in foot core, there is a session, or I say a session, there is a training plan that you can overlay on top of your current Sanlam Cape Town Marathon plan that'll really help you. And it shows you, it walks you through all of those exercises that Shona was talking about, and it's literally step by step. So just go to training plans, type in foot core, and it should pop up. Lindsey, welcome back. Question from Shalongo. Shalongo saying, my schedule's quite tight during the week, so for the past 3 weeks, I've been doing only one long run of between 30 and 35 kilometers per week on the weekend.
Look,
Is it
Shalongo,
recommended
it's
to
not
continue that way?
But life is what life is. So it's very difficult to sit here and tell someone that cannot train during the week that they should not be doing something. So yes, in an ideal world, you'd probably be better off doing 25 Ks on the weekend and 2 times 7 to 10 Ks in the week. So, if you could manage something like that, that's probably better for you. However, what is working is that you are doing too much on the weekend. But if you manage that in such a way that you don't actually hurt yourself, you're then getting a full week to recover. So again, while not ideal, at least your body is getting a way of recovering from that excessive loading every weekend. And if you can't get to running, but you can spare, let's say you could spare 30 minutes twice a week, I would look at doing the long run on a Sunday and then doing your strength training on a Wednesday and a Friday, or a Tuesday and a Thursday. That kind of splits. If you can do 30 minutes of strength twice a week and then those long runs, that would probably still be a little bit better than what you're doing now. But those are the 2 ways that I'd probably look at tackling it.
Cool stuff. All right, Lindsey, Brian's from Cape Town. His training is going reasonably well. He's been doing 60 to 70 kilometers per week, including 2 to 3 quality sessions. How much quality work should you be doing in a week's worth of training?
Depending on your background and your ultimate goal and the plan that you're on, essentially you never want your high intensity sessions, including warm up and cool down, to exceed 20% of your total volume. So in this scenario, if you're running 70 Ks a week, you don't want more than 14 Ks across 2 sessions. That's the maximum to be high intensity. So as soon as you're doing it, in that scenario, if you were going to do 3, you'd want to make sure that those 3 sessions didn't total more than 15 Ks all added up, I'd say. But it's really not a good way of training. I would be far happier if you were doing 10 to 15%, especially if you're doing a job where you spend any length of time on your feet. I'd rather you were spending 10 to 15% or 1 session per week doing interval type of sessions, adding in some strength training. So you're looking at 7 to 10 Ks in 1 session of high intensity, 60 Ks a week of pretty easy running, and a bit of strength training. That's going to be a much better mix for you.
Cool stuff, Brian. I hope that helps. I love this. Lindsey from Simone. Simone saying the foot core is magic. I posted a picture of 3 pairs of my running shoes on the Coach Parry Facebook page a while back as evidence of how the foot core exercise have improved the big toe hole in her trainers, which is awesome. All right, question from Cheryl. I see we've just got a couple of minutes left, so we're going to try and squeeze in 2 more questions. Shona, this one's for you from Cheryl, saying, I'm still training with inflamed Achilles and getting treatment once a week. Is it advisable to continue as I'm doing 3-day runs and a 2-day swims? Is it advisable to continue as I'm doing my 3 days runs and 2-day swim strength? What would your advice be to runners coming in with an Achilles or plantar fasciitis?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Achilles or any kind of tendonitis is is that it's so temperamental. It doesn't respond to just rest alone. So if you give it absolute rest and then you start running again, it's just going to get inflamed. And it's this fine balance between loading it and resting it at the same time. And so, I mean, firstly, I'm always going to opt that you just see a physio and make sure that you're getting that sort of treatment, because that treatment where they can loosen up the calves and the structures around that will really, really help. But yes, if you get to the point where you're managing and you can maybe walk in some of your runs, obviously doing your swimming and that strength training is massively advisable. But if you can get to the point where you are running and it might take a little bit of time to warm up, but then when you're running, it's fine. And then after running, if there's no pain, that's really what we're looking for. But then adding in some of those foot core exercises are key. The one in particular is the one where you, where you have a tennis ball or cricket ball between your heels. And as you're doing a calf raise, you squeeze that ball, because what that is doing then is it's building the strength within the lower limb stabilizers, in particular muscles called the tibialis posterior. And what that does is it just takes a lot of the load off the rest of the structures around the Achilles. So yeah, I think, sorry, you did say you are getting treatment. So getting that treatment once a week is key. A slow, progressive build up into your running. And Lindsey, you can jump in here on me in terms of that. But working on some of those foot core exercises, I think, are absolutely key, because that's going to help, give you the strength back to take the strain off the Achilles.
The load that the pain doesn't increase. So the ideal is that we get that pain reducing, but in light of us having 6 weeks, what we really want to avoid is that the pain doesn't get worse. So if at best for now you can just maintain that balance of not getting any worse, we'll take it. But ideally, it'll just get slowly but surely better and better. Once you've got the balance of the running volume right versus the treatment.
Cool, great question. Lindsey, question from Seba. Seba says, what is the route profile? First time running the race.
Look, I mean,
and
it's
excited. Have you got
some
feedback on the route profile?
It's, this won't make any difference to you because you haven't run it before, but there's some slight changes to the way that it was run in the past. The beginning is similar, so you start off pretty flat, and then there's a long gradual climb up through the middle of town. So again, unless you're familiar with Cape Town, you won't know what I'm talking about, but you run the whole of Long Street. So you run from the bottom of Long Street to the top, and then you come all the way down Plain Street to the Good Hope Center. So that's most of the climbing down. There's a few small little climbs, when you go through Rondebosch. As I said, it's not pancake flat, but it's really not hilly. And then there is a bridge that you need to take into account. Again, not 100% sure of the distances because it is a slightly new route, but from our maths, that comes with about 8 Ks to go. So around about the 34K mark, you are going to go over a bridge, stairs, but they will build that over with wooden boards. So it'll just be a short, steep hill effectively. And then from there, we're going to head over to Sea Point and run all the way down to the Sea Point pool. So the finish is actually going to be a little bit more scenic than it has been in the past. And if the wind behaves, then that section it'll be a really nice section to finish on.
All right, cool. We're going to wrap up in a sec, but I have to ask this question just because it's a funny answer. Robert wants to know, and I'm going to point this one to Lindsey, Shona, even though it's a strength question. Robert wants to know, I do 2 days of strength training and want to do more running. Do I first do the running and then follow with the strength training, or doesn't it matter?
Training first, because you've got to have your vegetables before you're allowed pudding. Okay, so I know that I need to earn my run. So and look, I knew exactly why Brad was asking me that question. But to be honest, now that I don't miss my strength training for anything, it doesn't make a big difference. If you can, in an ideal world, you'll split them up. So you will do a run in the morning and the strength in the afternoon. But if you are on the boat that I'm in now, which is that I've got to get my training done in the morning, and you're doing them together, it doesn't really make a big difference. Try not to do hard runs and strength training one after each other. But yeah, so for the most part, I always do my strength training first, so that I've earned my pudding. But now that I'm so disciplined, I have to do them both in the morning. And so I head out with my running group at 5 a.m. and I do my strength training just before I start my work.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, no, Lindsey, he's
Anything
nailed
you
it.
want to add on there, Shona?
And I mean, because I personally like to do my run first and then my strength because I can't wake up in the mornings and the run wakes me up and then I feel awake enough to do the strength training and not drop any weights on my toes. But I was just going to say, I'm really glad that Lindsey's doing the strength training and eating his vegetables. It's making him a better runner, which is what makes me really excited. So yeah, look, I mean, the science will say, you can do. The science says that you should do your run first and then strength, but that's really orientated around sports that are rugby, American football, very strength orientated. So I'm honestly just happy if people are doing their strength training. That for me is enough.
Yeah, absolutely. We had so many great questions and so many that we couldn't answer. If I can ask you, if we didn't answer your question tonight, please go over to the Coach Parry app, pop it into the forum, and we will get to answer your question there as well. And if there are any other questions that pop up tomorrow or next week, the forum is the best place to go. Our coaches, Lindsey, Shona, Devlin, Marcus, are in there all the time answering questions. So make sure that you do pop those questions in there. And then just so you know, this is the first of a 3-webinar series. The next one is taking place on the 27th of September. We're going to be talking a lot about nutrition in that one and making sure that you get your nutrition right for race day. And then there is one on Monday, the 11th of October, which is race week. We're going to be talking logistics and that sort of stuff. Those 2 webinars will start at 7 p.m. South African time and not 8 p.m. And you can register for those, or if you know anybody else that's running the Sanlam Cape Town Marathon, just send them over to coachparry.com/SCTM. That's Sanlam Cape Town Marathon, and they can register for that as well. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really do hope you got a ton of value out of the session. If you've got, like I said, any questions, pop them in the forums also, and we look forward to engaging with you guys there. Lots of great feedback in the chat as well. Shona, thank you so much for your time tonight. Lindsey, ditto to you as well. And thank you to everyone else for spending this time with us. Hope your training continues to go well, and we look forward to seeing you in just a few weeks' time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.